Hello, everyone, and welcome to NewSpace's The New Africa, a panel discussion on African space policy. Today, we'll delve into some of the most important topics, issues, and decisions that the African space scene has to face in the present, and also the ones that are going to shape its future. So big thanks to everyone that has made this possible. Also, big thanks to everyone that is in here watching us. And the huge thanks to our 6 speakers, which really, they form a dream lineup. And I'm going to start introducing them in alphabetical order. So I'm honored to first present Dr. Chizea, Dr. Francis Chizea, an MSS alumni and the General Director of the National Space Agency of Nigeria. Francis, would you like to please say a few words?
Thank you, Elias. It's my pleasure to be here this afternoon, and I look forward to a very good panel discussion today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francis. Okay, next one is Zolana Rijoao, the head of the Angolan Space Office. Zolana, please.
Thank you, Elias, for this wonderful opportunity. President Juan, congratulations for this wonderful conference. I hope I'll be able to share with you all some of the experiences that Angolan has been thrilling in space programs and space technology. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Zolana. Next one is Dr. Peter Martinez, also an alumni of ISU and the Executive Director of the Secure World Foundation right now. Please, Dr. Martinez.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are joining from. It's a great pleasure to be back at ISU, even if virtually. I'm excited to be part of this panel and looking forward to the discussion.
Next one is Poncho Maruping, which is currently the head of commercialization in South Africa of one of the most important astronomy projects in the world, actually. So the South Kilometer Array project. Please, Poncho.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation, and I absolutely look forward to talking about space with my fellow Africans.
Perfect. Okay, so next we have Dr. Tidiane Ouattara, who works as a science expert coordinator for GNES and the Africa Support Program at the African Union Commission. Please, Dr. Ouattara.
Good morning or good afternoon. I'm very happy to be here with you, and it is a huge opportunity to share with you what we are doing at the continental level or with respect to space matters.
Okay, so last but not least, Rania Tukebri, my colleague, regional coordinator for Africa at SGAC. Rania.
Hello and welcome everyone, and thank you for inviting me to this great panel, and I'm looking forward to start discussing with these guest leaders.
Okay, so last myself, I'm an MSS 20 student and the other regional coordinator for Africa at SGAC. So you might have realized that this introduction was a bit quick, but that is to give as much time as possible for the questions. So without further delay, let's start with a series of questions that will be followed by the ones from the audience, so yourself. So for our first question, we're going to talk about the African Space Agency. So as you might know, in recent years, there have been numerous debates around the creation of this space agency. Legislation for it was passed by the African Union in 2017, and last year it was Egypt who got to have the headquarters. And in theory, the agency should be up and running by 2023. Now, this year, in February, the last progress report for the Agenda 2063 showed that there have been some delays in financial and structural planning by the member state, and it is actually not very clear what this agency, what the main purpose of this agency will be. So my question for you is, what do you think, which value proposition for African countries, both the ones with an already established space capability and the ones that are taking their first steps, which value proposition do you think it should have? Or in other words, what do you think should be the first project run by the agency? And I'll start by asking Dr. Ouattara, who's the representative here of the African Union. Please, Dr. Ouattara.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it is an opportunity for us to clearly inform people, because there is no delay. We are making a very good progress. when people talk about delay, it means that they don't know the system. The African Space Agency is an organ of the African Union Commission. We are talking about an organ belonging to 55 countries. It takes time to move from a step to another step. The policy has been adopted in 2016. In 2018, 2 years later, we had the statute. And 1 year later, the head of state and government chose Egypt to host it. We are making a very good progress. For the financial and structural implications, there is a process within the organization we have to go through. And the report you are talking about is the report we wrote. It was to inform the member states. The delays here should be in between brackets. It is the delay perhaps because people were expecting to have the agency quickly. That being said, I can come back to that to give more clarification. It is normal, it is in a normal process. The second point I really wanted to talk about is really the value we are talking about. I'm a little bit surprised, and we are surprised when people say they don't know what the African Space Agency should do. I will refer and ask you to go to the statute. Article 2, Article 3, Article 4, and Article 5 are clearly stating what this agency should do. It is clear that as an organ of the African Union Commission, the African Space Agency will promote, will advise and coordinate the continental space activities with the support from the national space agencies and many other national space institutions and other players in Africa like the NGOs. It is clear that the role of coordination is the big role. And in the space policy and strategy, you'll see that there are two goals for the policy: coordinating space matters, developing a regulatory framework at the continental level. At the strategic level, we want the space to be a very big pillar of the socio-economic development of Africa. And we also want to develop local capacity. The African Space Agencies will be there.
Okay, so Dr. Ouattara, I'm going to pass the question to Dr. Chizea and ask him, after hearing all this information, what do you think, or what would you like the participation of NASDA to be in this African Space Agency, bearing in mind all the information that we just received from Dr. Ouattara? You're muted, Dr. Francis, perhaps.
I thought you can do unmute me automatically. Anyway, NASDA participated very actively in the production of the space policy, that is African space policy, and the status. As an agency, we look forward for cooperation between African countries in the area of space. It's expensive. Most African countries are having their own small space programs. But with the African Space Agency, we can have centers of excellence in certain areas. For example, using South Africa as a center of excellence in implementing the astronomy program, Nigeria in implementing the satellite development program. Of course, taking into account the facilities that are already in existence and pulling it together as one, as Africans, so that we can move quickly. Budgetary constraints have been a major problem within Africa for the development of space generally, not just for Nigeria, but for every other African country. Now, pulling our resources together, we can move faster. And that's the main essence why the African Space Policy and the African Space Agency have been approved by our governments.
So I like one of the things that you said about astronomy and South Africa. I'll come back to Zolana just now, but before I want to ask Ponso, what does she think? What do you think that what role should astronomy and the South Kilometer Array project, especially knowing I believe South Africa is the only African state which is participating in the first level of this project. What do you think should be the relation between this project and the African Space Agency?
Thank you. So, besides the fact that South Africa hosts the telescope, it was our commitment from the beginning that we will work with African partners, not only to, in future, perhaps have a complementary infrastructure place there, but we've already started the capacity building initiatives. We give scholarships to the other African partners for their students to start using the instrument to train wherever possible. And I think that, if anything, the way we've approached engagements with African partners at SKA could be an example of how the African Space Agency also engages. And then more importantly for me, never mind around the astronomy itself, is that whatever is happening, there has to be a lot more engagements with African partners. I have a sense that there isn't enough of that happening at this point, in terms of making sure that the policy and the strategy are implemented, bringing everybody on board, because this can't be, limited to only one or two countries that are currently active.
So I will go to Zolana now. So Zolana, having heard this last words from Ponso, and knowing that Angola is one of the countries that is putting the highest amount of money into space in this last few years, could you give us some thoughts on this? And again, I want to insist on, okay, there is in place already a policy for this space agency, but what are the specific projects that this space agency will be coordinating and running, or you would like to see it doing so?
Yes, thank you, Elias. And I'm in perfect align with what our previous cohort in the panel they just said. Bear in mind that one of the things we have been focusing on the Angolan context is to do a sustainable approach on space programs. One of the challenges we're going to have with African Space Agency, as other space programs on the continent, will be human resources capability. It's not by accident that South Africa and Nigeria, Ghana, Egypt, which are some of the strongest African continents in terms of education and human resources capability, they've been having actually ahead of most of us. And our priority since we started with space program was developing human resource skills. We have been doing for the past 6 years. We have moved from 0 engineers to 60 among PhDs, masters, and bachelor's degree. And what we are trying to do now is to approach African Union through Dr. Otara. We have been working with South African on specific pilot projects to come up with a framework that can represent a regional integration. We have started with SADC region. I'll be stopping here because of the time, and then I can develop much further. Thank you.
Thank you, Zolana. Thank you. So, Dr. Martinez, I know you have written articles in the past about the South African Space Agency and your thoughts on it. So I'll give you free floor to express this again, if they have changed, give us an update on them.
Well, thank you for inviting me to speak on the panel. So I just wanted to reflect on the comments made by the previous speakers on the African Space Agency progress and the African space policy. I think it is very impressive that the continent is now at the point where we are developing a continental agency. The one thing that I just want to caution against is that we should be careful not to be caught up in what I call cargo cult policy making. And what I mean by that is that in the Second World War, there were Pacific islands that benefited hugely from the construction of air bases to support the war effort. And when the war ended and all the airplanes went home, the cargo stopped coming. And so the islanders would build these sort of ritual structures to try and attract the cargo planes back. And I think we kind of fall into that sort of pitfall sometimes in policy making. We think that if we have these sort of structures in policies, such as references to human capital development or industrial development or establishment of new institutions, that will somehow automatically draw the necessary investment and developments. And we realize that it's actually a lot harder than that. So I think the important thing is to make sure that the underlying conditions are created and sustained in the member states so that the African Space Agency can be successful and the African states themselves can have robust space programs. And this is a challenge. And the question is, what are we doing at national level in African countries to build the capacities that an African Space Agency will ultimately rely on?
Okay, thank you. Let's take that, what countries are doing nationally, and I would like to ask Rania, what is Tunisia's position right now with regards to all of this?
Well, Tunisia actually now, we can call it a very big consumer of space. So we use a lot of space data, and we are still in the phase of building a space strategy and building a space program. And I think you know that we still don't have a national space agency. And the question to ask is if we have the need to create a space agency. But I do believe that with the creation of the African Space Agency, it's going to be a better position. We will be in a better position because things will be with a better governance of technically speaking, also legally speaking, on governance, on quality, innovation, on budget, on collaboration. So we will be in connection with other countries, like have already a big past in space, like over the past 40 years, like Nigeria, South Africa, Algeria, maybe a little bit, also Egypt, and maybe to create our own, build again our own space program. So yeah, we will start launching our first satellite very soon, which is already a huge step. But we have to make our space program more in order. It's just to say we cannot start things in a very chaotic situation.
Okay, thank you, Rania. So we're going to move to the second question, which is on Earth observation. So the question here is about, let's say, the debate or the question on whether to invest more money into launching more satellites to produce data, for the countries to produce data themselves, or to just take the data from free programs like Copernicus, or buy them from private companies like Planet, instead of producing them ourselves. That, or the question of going and invest money on making the downstream value adding part of the Earth observation industry grow, because once you have your data, it takes some time before you can convert that into decision ready information, which is what you want the data for. So I'm going to start by asking this question to Bonso. So do you believe we should be focusing on launching more Earth observation satellites, or using already available data and develop the downstream value adding part of the market?
I believe that there's no reason African countries cannot focus on both. Developing capabilities along the value chain can never be a waste. So, you know, there's this expression that investment in space is made on Earth. Whatever money is spent on developing a program, if it's spent within your own country or within the continent, it actually is an investment in the country. So I think it's necessary that you know, as the capabilities develop in our own countries, that we try and establish capabilities along the full value chain. In South Africa, you know, the legislation that established the Space Agency mandates the agency to acquire data on behalf of a government, and this is to avoid government paying twice, for instance, or more than once, for data, and therefore it allows for pooling resources and making sure that this data, once acquired, can be made available a lot more broadly for the users along the value chain. We are also working on when I say we, I mean the South African Radio Astronomy Observatory is actually assisting the South African National Space Agency with infrastructure to set up a data cube. And this will allow users of Earth observation data to have more analysis ready data, which means that they will not focus a lot of their effort on just cleaning up the data and making it ready, but they can actually focus on developing products that add value.
Okay, so I'm going to pass the question to Dr. Chizea. Do you have anything to add to this? What is Nigeria's position with respect to this?
I quite agree completely with Poncho. Africa should invest in both, that is, developing satellites and also in providing products, that is, investing in areas of turning this data into products. That is the only way you can actually service the people. You mentioned that there are free data from Copernicus. Yes, the free data from Copernicus, but at times you need certain kind of data that are not available free of charge, and you need to get them. And there's nothing as good as you being able to acquire your own data at your own time and the way you want it. If you rely on just buying data, you have to rely that or believe that the provider of the data is available to carry out your campaign when you want it. But when you own your own satellite, you can actually go out and do a whatever campaign you want using specific resolutions as you want. You can decide what you want, the target applications you want to do. But if you're taking a free data, you're just stuck with whatever they provide for you. So we as Africans should invest in Earth observation satellite, and as well as providing, investing into being able to process this data into products for our people.
I think I could not agree more, and this is also the way I think about it as well. So thank you very much for both of you. Being aware of time, I'm going to move to the next question already. This is a bit of a tricky question. Perhaps you all know that in the last few years, well, in the last couple of decades even, a few countries, China, Russia, and many other European countries have played a quite big role in the development of the space industry in many African states through investments and through collaborations. And this has definitely helped many of these countries advance their space programs or their space capabilities a lot. But there are still some questions in the air on what could be the future consequences of this of some of these deals. And there are even talks about this being just part of a much bigger geopolitical influence game and some sort of a form of neo-colonialism. So what are your thoughts on this? And I would like to start knowing Zolana's opinion.
Thank you, Elias, for your question. I'll continue with my thought. Neo-colonialism, in my opinion, has to do with the lack of knowledge. You can only fight this if you have a knowledge, period. And in Africa, this is the biggest drawback, and I'll jump to the Angolan experience. Our government, when decided to implement our space program and space strategy 2016 and 2025, it decided that we should put together young guys, average ages of 25, not more. And what we have achieved for the last 6 years was because the government said there is no consultancy and we have to build capacity within. I always mention the fact that if you don't know what you would like to have, then it will be difficult for you to ask. One of the reasons that we get a lot of pressure of buying, I can say, box products, black boxes products in Africa, in space specific, is because we are not prepared to engage in the world-class level, as you said, with Russia, US, and so forth. That's why our strategy of government was to make a joint venture with one of the big players, as Russia, as you said, but we've been discussing it with the Airbus, Thales, and other companies in order to acquire knowledge so that we can fight with neocolonialism. This is my specific point of view in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Zolana, and I'm aware of the activities in Angola, and I really like everything that is going on there. So I want to hear the opinion of Dr. Martinez as well on this matter. Please, Dr. Martinez. You're muted. If you can unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Thank you. Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to confine myself to sort of general remarks in this area without referring to any countries by name.
Yep.
As we all know, space is both a subject and an object of policy, and states use their space capabilities to support their geopolitical ambitions, either as an instrument of soft power or to cement alliances for political or economic or military reasons. And in my view, states should avoid finding themselves in a kind of end-to-end reliance on a single partner country for all aspects of their space activities, where, you know, there's a kind of almost what you might call a vertically integrated dependency from human capital development to financing to ownership and operation of assets, because such relationships would greatly reduce a country's freedom of action and its independence to partner with other countries and to diversify their own space connections. It could also translate to political influence of the country at, or influence on the country at domestic level, in its control over its own natural resources, for example, or even in its sovereign ability to conduct international relations with other states. So, to quote an old saying, it's never a good idea to put all of one's eggs in the same basket. And fortunately, nowadays, there are many, many options for emerging space nations to diversify their space partnerships.
Thank you very much for that. I'm going to go to the last question before we open the questions for the audience. So this one, I'll first ask this to Rania, because she's the perfect person to answer this, as well as Dr. Ouattara, who will be the perfect person to close my questions. So you might know that Africa has the youngest population in the world, and this is really a unique asset. However, sometimes there seems to be like a sort of generation gap between the youngest and the more senior generations, where and this is also intimately linked to brain drain, and perhaps sometimes the reality of both of them are a bit disconnected, and the ambitions of the African youth are not the same ones as the ones of the senior generations. So what are your thoughts on this, Rania, and how would you maximize this potential of the young population, especially being the regional coordinator of probably the most important organization for young people in the world, which is SGAC? So please give us your thoughts.
Thank you for this question. And as you said, so SGAC is among the biggest organizations that is working on this point. Just to say, to repeat what you said, is that over 50% of the population in Africa are young people, which offer us a lot of opportunities to empower ourselves in terms of capacity of building capacities. But in my opinion, we should view like things in two different ways. The first thing is that we should involve the space programs in the space in our education, in our official governmental education like programs. And this we should of course cooperate with the governments, with the educational ministries and so. And this should be for the next generations. For the current ones, on another level, we should focus a lot on educating them, on making them aware of what's happening around. And this is the job of organizations like SGAC, the work of universities. I think ISU is doing a great job on this to make like the online work, the courses, the summer courses, the workshops, and all this stuff. This is very important to educate people and to show them, to give them like this space background, because you know that we have different backgrounds for electronic, mechanical, chemical, biological, different ones that can be all for space applications. So I would just need to give them this little background that is still missing. And of course, the side of using CubeSats is very important. This is just an example of making like a technical project, something that they can do technically in order to start working for space.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, just one last point. We should just focus a lot on the diversity. So we should think on all kind of jobs related to space, not only for engineers, but also for policies, for lawyers, for
interdisciplinarity is the key here. Yeah. Thank you so much, Rania. And I'll give floor to Dr. Watara, although I have been told that Porso would also like to say some words, but please first, Dr. Watara, if you can give us an answer for this question from your perspective.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would say what my colleague Rania said is correct, but what I just want to put between brackets is the fact that most of the time people talk about the gaps between the policy or decision makers and the young. That is not correct, because there are several policies in place at the continental and at the national level, with respect to the space even, that is trying to encourage the young people to be part of the process. That is one thing. The brain drain, it is not because of that there is brain drain. Brain drain is, there are several factors. And we have, and I agree with you, we have to create all the conditions, be at the infrastructure level, be at the involvement, engagement level, giving more place, more opportunities to young people. That is correct, to retain them, to even encourage those who left already to come back. And the education, Nelson Mandela, to quote Nelson Mandela, he said, the education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. This is what Africa has to do at the space level, not because of the young, because of the fact that space is like new in Africa. I'm not saying that some African countries were not there. They've been there for years. But when you look at the four segments of the space, Earth observation, navigation and positioning, satellite telecommunication, and astronomy, there is a lot to do in terms of human capital development. Our young people should be trained, should be inserted. We have to give them opportunities. And African Union Commission, we are doing it through the GMS in Africa, for example. And we are advising programs to do so the same. Meaning, once you have a program, you have to give opportunity to young people to be trained and even to occupy positions that expose them to the challenges. We can come back to that. There are initiatives. We need to increase that. We need to encourage that. But saying there is nothing, it is a little bit, because when you look at the national space agencies, there are many young engineers working there. They are not old people. And this is what we have to encourage and we have to increase. This is what I would like to say here. But the youth, they have to take their place also. It is a personal and individual decision to be involved in space or to choose space as career. No one will do that for you. A policy will not do that for you. But we have to expose these young people. We have to encourage them. African Union Commission is doing that. Rania, your organization, every year we sponsor 20 young people to participate to the HLC meeting. We can come to that. African Space Stakeholders meeting. Those who think that only 1 or 3 countries are consulted, no. The African Space Policy Strategy, Statute of the African Space Agencies, the 55 African countries have been consulted. And Francis said that. They are playing key role. Peter Martinez here, one of the pioneers of this policy. Chiza, one of the key players. And Zolona will work together. I've been in contact with you just a few days ago. We'll work together. We are bringing all Africans together to do the work. And the young youth is our, I would say, key factor for the success. African young people, they are the key factor for the success of space.
I'm really happy to hear these words from you, Dr. Watara. I especially really like the last 2 points, and I'm really happy that you're going to start working with Zolana as well. So that's great news. So yes, to finish off, I'll let Ponso, if she still wants to add the points that she wanted to, and then we'll move into the questions from the audience.
Okay, I just wanted to add quickly that, this often requires very targeted programs. I sometimes hear a lot about when people talk about young people and just focus it on training at universities. When we have programs, they have to look after them through their professional growth as well, so that opportunities are created as people develop their capabilities, so that they can get into various spaces. And just to also emphasize that we don't forget the regulatory side as well, that, space, it's not just scientists and engineers who can play a role in space. As the African Space Agency develops, they're going to need competent space lawyers. And South Africa has been hosting the regional moot court for many years now, where we invite, we involve other African countries so that we can start building capabilities in space law as well.
Thank you so much, Fonso. And now we'll move into the questions from the audience. I'm not sure whether the screen with the questions from Slido is going to be shared or not, or should I go directly to the questions that I'm receiving here? Okay, well, okay. I see several questions in here, and I'm also receiving some more because we have someone also selecting the questions working with us. So I'll start with the most voted one, I guess, to start with. So what additional initiatives do you propose to improve Africa's space ecosystem upstream and downstream? And let's try to make this like really specific initiatives, if that is possible. So which one of the speakers would like to take this question?
I can try.
Perfect. Go ahead.
If you do not mind. I think what is key today is to increase the involvement and engagement of the private sector, because the value added in space arena all over the world is coming from the private sector. The innovation is coming from academia, but more from the private sector. The NewSpace we are talking about, it is the engagement and the commitment of the private sector. To be able to do that, be at the national level, be at the regional level, be at the continental level, we have to create a kind of policy frame, a regulatory frame that will create this, that will be a kind of incentives to not only bring those who knows and who have the capacity. And that brings me to the question on Russia and China. We have to be able to learn from others. And I fully agree with Peter Martinez. A nation or an individual, an institution should diversify its partners. You can be surprised. Russia and China are not the first investors in space arena in Africa. I will bring you to the report on the space done by Space in Africa, and you'll see space industry in Africa. Then what is the private sector? It is important to look at this angle. We do not have too much time. There are several actions the countries can do, incentives, for example, tax-free or some specific advantages when these private sector and space arena are being created. If they recruit a young person, for example, either we give them some additional money or for the first 6 months salary, or we reduce their tax income, things like that. There are several policies we can have, but I will stop here. The private sector should be in the middle of the space development.
So I love that you're bringing up the private sector, because that was one of the things missing from my questions, and I think it's something really important that we have to talk about. And I have one question here, so I have to get close to the screen to read it. So, and I think I'm going to address this one. Well, I'll read it first, and then let's see. So, what are your thoughts on make or buy for tech? And if you lean towards the former, what are your current efforts to strengthen the startup and SME ecosystem? From Anonymous. So who would like to take this question? Zolana, perhaps you, or Dr. Martinez, Ponso, Rania?
Okay, I can try a little bit based on Angolan experience. From 6 years ago, it was impossible to talk about startups in space in Angola. Right now, we have more than 10 startups, very active. As we speak, we have more than 6 Angolan engineers with Airbus on the Space Valley. And what these engineers are doing at the moment, they are learning the whole ecosystem, which they can come up and replicate to increase startups in Angola. What I can say is that we need to find regional initiatives, national and regional initiatives, so that we can increase this opportunity for young. What happened is most of the youngs in Africa, they are very risk averse. And here I would like to bring the combination of have experience and the risk awareness of our youngsters. In this case, we could continue to collaborate with companies like Airbus, unions on to increase startups and SMEs.
I think we lost you a little bit there. Okay. Yeah, please, go ahead.
You lost me?
No, it was good. It was good. I thought we lost you, but you had just unmuted yourself. Muted yourself. So, is any of our speakers would like to add anything for these 2 questions?
Yeah, I can.
Yes, please.
I can go ahead. So I do think that, I mean, as an example, I do think that if you are buying, make sure that it's, tied to what Zolani was talking about, where it's real capacity building. Just, as an example, when we did the Sumbandila SET project, we had a very targeted internship program, and sometimes it takes time, but I can say that a lot of the people who were in that internship program are still in the space sector in one capacity or another, and 2 of them have started their own company very recently. And I think that, if you are going to do a make or a buy program, link it to some long-term goals, such as building real capacity, so that in future that program can, create your own capacity in the country.
Okay. I think I saw one question that I would like to ask Dr. Martinez, if you can please bring up the screen. Okay. So from Jonas, from Mauritius. Hi, Jonas. So African nations are new entrants to the space domain, which is already occupied by a few established actors, mainly in Europe and North America. So how does this affect the African space actors? And all the new things that we're starting. Please, Dr. Martinez.
Thank you for that question. So I will begin by observing that the space arena is becoming much more commercial, as the other speakers observed. It's becoming more congested, but also more communal arena involving many new actors. The lowering of technological and financial barriers to becoming an active participant in space means that we're seeing a very rapid growth in both the number and diversity of space actors, and also all sorts of new kinds of space activities. And we're seeing, currently the space economy is estimated to be around 400 billion, depending how you count it, and it is expected to grow significantly in the coming decades. And whereas in the early days of the space age, a launch vehicle delivered a single satellite into orbit, we now routinely see dozens of satellites being launched into space on a single launch, and even the launch vehicle is reusable. So this means that space is becoming more congested. As I said, we're seeing all kinds of new technologies being deployed, such as AI, new kinds of space activities, such as rendezvous and proximity operations. And all of this rapid change creates uncertainty. And there's a recognition that the existing legal order in outer space is no longer adequate to provide the certainty that's needed for investors, for governments, for security, and that we need to supplement this with new rules of the road somehow. And because of this, there are developments both at national level and at multilateral level to develop such new rules of the road. And it's clear, of course, that countries with the more advanced space capabilities will obviously try to ensure that these new rules will favor their continued dominance of the space sector, whether it's technological or commercial or military. And I've observed that Africa is often absent or a passive participant in these multilateral discussions. And I think it'll be very, very important for African countries to understand these challenges, what is at stake here, and to engage purposefully in these multilateral fora as these new rules of the road are developed, because the future will be here sooner than we think.
I was going to jump to another question, but I think because of the last thing that you said, I'll give the chance to Dr. Tijia to say something about this, since he's the leader of one of the most important, or one of the most advanced space countries in Africa. So, Dr. Tijia, what would you have to say about this last point of the participation of African space countries in making things international? And please, someone unmute Dr. Tijia.
Sorry, I quite agree with Peter on the point he has made. We know that Africa generally is getting into the space business a bit late, but we have to start from somewhere. And like you said in your first questions, or the first two questions, that you see the Russians, the Chinese, Europeans coming in. We have to pay for some of the things we've lost in the past. We're not starting from afresh. I'll give an example. Most of the time, most of our projects, we try to have what we call know-how technology training alongside. For example, when we built the Nigerian SAT-2 with SSTL, we had 26 of our engineers work alongside SSTL engineers in developing and building the Nigerian SAT-2. The training process there led to the engineers to build a training model which was built to flight standard as a demonstration of the fact that they understood precisely what they have been taught during the 3 years training period. The Nigerian SAT-X was launched alongside the Nigerian SAT-2 and is currently in orbit and performing excellently well. This also is a boost for the engineers and the scientists that, yes, having the right facilities back at home, we can replicate that fate. And like I said, we're starting Africa generally, we're coming into this field a bit later than most advanced countries, but we have to start from somewhere. We need to start from somewhere. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tijia. Thank you. So I have one last question. It's actually, well, two questions for Rania. One of them is more a favor than a question. So the first one is a question on CubeSats, because I believe Tunisia is working on I'm not sure whether it has happened or not. It was meant to be this month. But what do you think about African countries starting their own CubeSat programs, more African countries, and why do you think this is not happening? Because of course we do have quite a few African countries who have launched CubeSats, and many of them have launched their own CubeSats. But bearing in mind the low cost of developing a CubeSat and the ratio of benefits to cost is so high, why do you think this is not happening more often? What are the challenges that is making this difficult? And then the favor is, if you want to share with the audience as the SJC regional coordinator, since both of us are here, if you would like to share some of the activities that we're conducting here in Africa. Yeah.
Okay. So for the CubeSat experience, I will just talk a little bit about the benefits of the CubeSat that I think you all know about it. It's like about the low cost, about the way of maybe sometimes making like 100% local products, space products, about the way of moving from being consumer of space to a producer of space in terms of service, or in terms of producing real spacecrafts and CubeSats, on the way of making, let's say, low maintenance costs, having no maintenance costs and less costs in general of producing things. And but actually there are also some challenges and disadvantages of CubeSats. And we all know that CubeSats cannot replace big satellites. And also, you know that also the size and the mass of the CubeSat has advantages and disadvantages, but you all know that there are still researchers that are going on the space to make it more proper and to make, let's say, more missions using CubeSat. My opinion on countries that are still not developing their own CubeSats, in my opinion, because they still maybe don't have clear space programs. And I'm very happy because this African Space Agency is becoming real now, because it will assist them to coordinate with other countries, to assist to the creation of these space programs and to create a real project. But this is, you know, that we can make it with universities. Internationally speaking, we can have the support of space leaders like Russia and China, like you mentioned, but this will be, of course, like short-term or long-term partnerships. For Tunisia, for example, we will have a satellite. It's a big satellite, not a small one, but we are also developing other CubeSats, and we are also in the phase now of creating CubeSats, and some startups already started on this phase. So, and you know that Tunisia still don't have a clear, let's say, a clear path, clear programs of space, but we are based on these programs to develop it. The second point of SGAC, so Elias and I are regional coordinators for SGAC, and what we do is, I mentioned a little bit, we try to spread out more the space awareness. We try to spread out the information related to space programs for education, for making projects. We try to put people also all together to create this new idea of bringing all generations all around the same table. And we are also supporting people that are starting their first steps in space and giving them maybe the aptitude of space and showing them that we can do it with all our backgrounds, different backgrounds. So we have people from all different backgrounds, let's say space law and space engineering, space policy, from everywhere, and we can build together a space. And we have it in different regions. And in Africa, I believe that Elias and I started already doing a great job. So we are trying to put things in order first, and we are trying to be in touch with the space agencies, the space institutions from Africa and also from Middle East and Europe and also other regions.
Thank you very much, Rania, for that. So we have 3 minutes left. There are a few other really interesting questions, but I believe just out of respect to the next session, I'll just start closing this. So I'll first give all our speakers a chance to, in a few seconds, say their final words. So let's start with Dr. Martinez, please.
Thank you. Well, it's been a great panel and really enjoyed hearing the views of my fellow panelists. Just one closing thought. We heard a lot about the importance of establishing a domestic space capability and particularly in industry. And I just want to reflect that governments that go down this path have to commit to it long term and be prepared to support their industry by being a kind of a anchor client for some of the products and services that industry will provide.
Dr. Watara, please.
Yes, look, coming back to the title, NewSpace is New Africa. I would say no one will develop Africa on behalf of Africans. It is Africans who should develop Africa. It is true in all areas. It is also true in space arena. Be diaspora, be young people, we have to contribute. We are not obliged to come back to the continent. From where we are, we have to continue being involved, and youth is key for this success. We have to look at Africa. Africa has been always looked as, into the angle of development. Africa should be looked now in the angle of investment. Adesina, the CEO of the African Development Bank, to quote him quickly, said the expenditures in the upcoming 2 to 3 years will be $1.3 to $1.4 trillion. And business to business expenditures will be 3.5 trillion. Space is key in all kinds of business now. It's time for Africans, be national, regional, or continental authority, to work together with other from all over the world.
Very wise words.
Integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ouattara. Let's ask Rania yourself again, please.
I would
Your final words, yeah.
Yeah, final words. So I would like to say that the first thing always is to focus on the infrastructure. We should have things in order. It's the most basic thing to start with. The second thing is what Dr. Ouattara said, is that we should focus a lot on the youth, because we have to build things now, and the people that are existing now can start building up things and across the continent. And of course, the partnerships are very important, and it will make things faster. And instead of making projects for 20 years, we can make it in 5 and 10 years. But of course, we should have clear strategy and clear policy over there, so that we won't have any issue later on.
Perfect. Thank you, Rania. And let's try to do the next 3 in 1 minute. So let's start with Ponso, then Dr. Tizea, and then Zolana. A few seconds each one of you, so we don't go over time.
Okay, so my final comment is that, assessment indicates that for every rand we spend in the space sector, it creates a 10 times benefit in terms of value. So for me, it's important where this money is spent. So if it's spent in our own countries, in our own continent, that benefit accrues to the continent. So I am looking forward to us working as Africans together to really build a vibrant space sector in the future.
Thank you so much, Ponso. Dr. Tizea?
Thank you, Elias. The only way we as Africans can go far in space is when we work together. Resources are limited in almost all African countries, but if we pull the resources together, we can move further. We can do it. We have the capacity to do it. And also at this point in time to also plead for the involvement of the private sector in the space program in Africa. The only way we can sustain it is when we have active participation of the private sector in space affairs in Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Zolana, please.
Yes, thanks, Elias. Everybody was very fruitful discussion. Just very quickly to say, this is something I insist in our government in Angola. Doesn't make sense, all these investment and discussions that we have, if we don't see that we're improving people's life with what we are doing. And just to open a quick bracket, if you see Agenda 2030, Africa is lagging behind, and we only have 10 years to fulfill the 70 Sustainable Development Goals. The World Economic Forum is predicting this year, extreme weather, water crisis will be eating hard on Africa. So my final thought will be that Africa come together to use space technology to improve people's life. Thank you.
I love closing this with the words of Africa coming together is the answer. And I'm really glad to see that all our 6 speakers, which are really leaders in the space African scene, are really agree on this point. So yes, my last words are thank you very much to all of you, speakers, attendees on Zoom, on YouTube, and everyone that has been helping to make this possible. Have a great day. I really enjoyed this and I learned a lot. So I hope the rest did as well. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.